All right. Okay. Yes. All right. I'm Amy Medina, and I am really honored to be here with you guys. I am a novice. I feel just like some of you. I think some of you have way more publishing experience than I do. So so it's a privilege to be able to be here with you guys today. So a little of my background. Is it working? Yeah. Okay. I have an unusual story. I grew up in San Jose in Northern California, and that's where my parents still live. But when I was 6 years old, my parents became missionaries. And so I spent a good portion of my childhood in Liberia in West Africa and came back to the States for 10th grade and did the rest of my high school and college, first part of college in San Jose, and then moved down to Southern California to finish college at Masters University, which is in Santa Clarita. And that's where I met my husband, and we got married, and then left for the mission field ourselves a year after we got married. And so we got married in 2000, and then in 2001 we were on our way to Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, which is in East Africa. Wow. So that's actually where my connection with Crosswinds came about, was because we were missionaries and Crosswinds was one of our supporting churches. So there had actually been someone from our church in San Jose who would come down to this church. She passed away many years ago, but that was the connection originally with Crosswinds. And so Crosswinds has supported our family's ministry for at least 15 years, I think. I can't remember exactly when it was, but it's been that long. So that's kind of how I originally got connected with Crosswinds is through support, and they still support me now. So my husband and I spent 16 years in Tanzania, so pretty much most of our married life. We came back for a couple of years in between, and my husband went to seminary, but otherwise we were there. And in that time frame, we did a number of different ministries. We did some church planting. We did, my husband was a trainer for pastors. So he's a teacher, and he was training in a Bible school there. My primary ministry during most of the years we were there was at an international school. I'm a trained teacher by trade. I have a teaching credential. And so I was a elementary school teacher there, and then in the last few years we were there, I was actually the elementary school principal. But then also in that time frame, we adopted 4 kids from Tanzania. So they're all teenagers now. The youngest is 14 and the oldest is 19. We adopted them all when they were really little. And so part of those years I was a mom as well. That was my primary focus. But we returned to the States in 2020, and what brought us to this area, so I live currently in Redlands, was my husband got a teaching job at Arrowhead Christian Academy. And so since 2020, we've been living in Redlands, and we go to Trinity Evangelical Free Church there.
Do you know Eric Glover?
No, I don't. But there's a lot of people there that we don't know.
Oh,
so
okay.
I'm sure that there's lots of people. It's a big church. There's a lot of people there that we don't know. We've been living in Redlands since 2020, and my husband teaches Bible at Arrowhead Christian, and that's where my kids go. Although my oldest is now at Crafton Community College. And in 2020, when we returned, I took a position with our mission organization, Reach Global. And so I am working for Reach Global in the department that works with new missionaries. So basically from the time someone applies to become a missionary, it's a pretty long, extensive application process that we walk through with them. And then until the time that they actually leave for the field. So I'm involved in their training and coaching as they're raising support and that kind of thing. So I'm part of that team now, and the headquarters is in Minneapolis, so I work remotely most of the time, but I do go to Minnesota several times a year. That's where I was last week for a training week for our new staff. So that's what I've been doing. But about writing, since that's why we're here today, I, like you, Elizabeth, I started writing when I was in 5th grade, so probably around 10 years old, I had a teacher who gave us, and this was when I was in Liberia as a missionary kid, I had a teacher who gave us a creative writing assignment every week, and we had to write something. She gave us a prompt and we had to write something. And I remember absolutely loving it. I remember my classmates groaning and moaning over it, and I looked forward to it every week, that I actually got to write something. And so that was kind of what really sparked my interest in writing. And then I remember my 6th grade English teacher required us to keep a journal. Again, I remember my classmates hating it, and I was like, this is so cool, this is so fun. And so that started me on journaling, and I kept journaling through college. I was pretty extensive journaler. And so from the time I was a little girl, I wanted to be a writer. I can remember saying, someday I'm going to be a writer. But then I became a teacher, and it just kind of faded into the background, and I didn't really think about it very much. I mean, I wrote newsletters. That's what missionaries have to do, right? Is write newsletters. But I didn't ever really think about getting started with writing again. I was involved in all of the ministry and teaching and that kind of thing when we were overseas. But then in 2007, it was January of 2007, I started a blog. And that was, I was a young mom. We had just gotten our first child. And that was an age when like a lot of my peers also had blogs. Mommy blogs is what everybody called them, and we would post pictures of our kids. This is before everybody was paranoid about that. Yeah. And so, for the first couple years that I kept a blog, it really was just pictures of the kids and things that were happening in our lives. And, my parents would read it and some friends back home, but that was really all it was, because that's what most people's blogs were. That's what most people did. But then slowly but surely, I started writing a little bit more. Instead of just posting pictures, I would start to write about things that were happening. I knew that I had a lot of supporters that were reading it. And so I started to write more about my life there. And as I continued to do that, I was like, I remembered like, oh, I really like to write. And this is actually, I really enjoy doing this. And I found that, people were really into it and they were reading it. And then I think it was around 2012 when a college professor of mine who had been reading it shared one of my posts with Tim Challies. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he's like a prominent Christian blogger. Like he's probably one of the most well-known Christian bloggers. And every day he posts links to other people's writing. And so this professor shared one of my posts with him, and he picked it up and posted it on his blog. And all of a sudden I had hundreds of readers instead of dozens. And so he started following my blog, Tim Challies did, and I actually really credit him with a lot. I've told him this, like I credit him with helping me to realize that I was a writer and that I wanted to do this, because all of a sudden I had an audience, and it was not just my family anymore, but it was all these other people who were coming to me because he was regularly linking to my posts. And so I really owe a debt of gratitude to him for bringing me so many readers, which then inspired me to keep writing, then I wanted to continue to do it. And so that kind of led into several years after that. I had submitted some guest posts to a blog called A Life Overseas, which is aimed at missionaries. And so I submitted some guest posts to that and then became one of their regular writers. Our denomination, EFCA, so Evangelical Free Church of America, they started asking me to write regularly for their blog. And so I started writing things for them. So things just kind of grew along the way. I did get one piece published in Christianity Today, but I haven't done a lot of just writing for profit. Like I just haven't really been motivated to do that. So I haven't done a lot of submissions in other places. It's mostly just been the blogging. Okay, so that's how I got into blogging, and I still do blog. Mary asked, how does God play a role in your writing? Well, that is a great question, because I really feel like as I began to get an audience, the spiritual aspect of it really took hold in my heart of realizing that writing is ministry. As a missionary, I really had sort of been marinated in the idea that everything is ministry anyway. And so writing was just an extension of that, where I felt like God was giving me things to say, and I had a responsibility to say it and to say it well. My perspective from living overseas was different than a lot of people's, and I felt like there were important things that I was learning that that God could use to teach other people. So I feel like even now when I write, I definitely am always looking for a reliance on the Holy Spirit. I always am praying through it and saying, God, help me to speak truth. Help me to say it in a way that's going to engage people, that's going to draw people in. My husband is the one that is always my first sounding board when I write something. And there's times when I'll read something and he'll say, Amy, he's like, the only people that are going to read this are the people that already agree with you. And that's a good challenge to me, because it's like, okay, like I don't want to just preach to the choir. Like I want to figure out, how can I say this in a way that I'm going to be able to actually help people to understand something new and not just say it to people who already agree. And so, so I feel like I really have learned to pray a lot when I'm writing and to say, God, help me to be speaking your truth in a new way that people are going to understand. The most challenging part of the writing process for me is definitely that I'm a perfectionist. And so oftentimes if the idea is not fully formed in my head, to get it down is a challenge for me. And so I think it was Stephen King who originally said, I hear it over and over again, but give yourself permission to write a terrible first draft. Mm-hmm. Like that is like a mantra in my head that I just have to keep telling myself over and over and over again, because that is my hardest part, is to just get it out and to just start sometimes. Mm-hmm. And so I think that is something that I just have to continue to push through, like to just force myself to just do it. And I keep telling myself, just write it down. It's okay if it's terrible. It's okay if it's terrible. Because then what I find is that then I'll go back and read it and I'm like, okay, it actually isn't as terrible as I thought it was going to be. And the revision process is way easier for me than the just getting it down. And so that's the part where I really have to just force myself to do it, is to just get it out, just to get that first draft out. And what do I enjoy most about writing? Well, I think that writing helps me to figure out what I think. Like writing is the way that I think in a lot of ways. And so there's been times when I've got ideas kind of rolling around in my head, and I'm confused about it. But as I start the process of writing, it actually helps me to figure out what I actually think and what I actually believe about something. So I think that there are things that I've written about that have really just given me strength in Christ and helped me to be more confident in what I believe, because I think when I write. And so I think that's what I enjoy most about it. But I also just really enjoy hearing from readers. I think that that's really what keeps me going, is when I just get somebody that emails me who's a stranger, so not somebody that feels like they have to say something nice, but somebody that's a stranger who writes and says, wow, that really touched me, or I really resonated with that. That is always just a really encouraging thing to me. And what I find too is that it's always fascinating to me the connections that people draw. So I would write about something that happened to me overseas, which was, completely different than what somebody in the US might experience. But yet, if I wrote from my heart, that I found that people would still draw connections to their own life. And I think that's just what's so amazing about writing, is that when you share from yourself, then it really helps other people to realize what they think about something too. And I love that. It just feels like magic. Yeah. Okay, so the book path. So I am under contract to write a book right now with a publisher. And how that came about, it's been a long process. So, I blogged for all these years, and, people would always say to me, when are you going to write a book? When are you going to write a book? When are you going to write a book? And I was like, oh, I don't know, maybe someday when my kids are in college, I don't know. And part of that was because I didn't have an idea for a book. Like, it wasn't something that I really, so it wasn't super motivating to write a book because I didn't really have an idea. But when we moved back to the States, and I was really wrestling with that transition, which was a huge transition after living all of my adult life overseas and then starting life over again here, I really wrestled a lot with, who am I? What am I supposed to be? How am I supposed to live? What is a Christian life supposed to look like for me? Because I had that figured out overseas, but I didn't have it figured out here. And the more that I thought about it, I realized, the things that I learned overseas actually apply to the Christian life in the States. And so as I was working that out myself, I was like, oh, I think there's a book here. I think there's a book in taking what I learned overseas and showing how it applies to the Christian life in the States. And so that's kind of how the idea was born. And for the first couple years, I opened a document on my computer, and I would just jot down ideas as they came to mind. Like I'd be in the shower, like that's always when they come, right? And I would just be making notes, and slowly, like kind of chapter ideas kind of started formulating of the different topics I would write about. And then let's see, this is 2025. So 2024, our mission organization allows people to have a sabbatical after every 4 years. And so I had a month sabbatical coming, and it was going to be March of 2024. And I realized, I was like, well, what am I going to do during the sabbatical? And I thought, okay, well, I have all these ideas. Let me actually see if I can do it. Let's see if I can actually write a chapter. Let's see if I can, instead of just writing 1,000-word blog post, can I actually write like a 5,000-word chapter? And so that's kind of what I did. Like I used that month to write a chapter, and I realized, okay, I could do this. I could write a chapter. But then also during that time, during that season, just did a lot of research on what goes into writing a book. I didn't know anything about the process of trying to get published. I learned how to write a proposal. I learned that when you want to get a nonfiction book published, that they don't want the whole book to be written before you submit it. They want you to have a couple sample chapters, and then to have just a proposal, like an outline of what you want to do, that nonfiction publishers want to work on the process with you. And so which is different from fiction, but so I just did all this research into how to write a proposal. I spent a long time on a proposal. I feel like that was a very time-consuming process to put together a proposal.
And did you know where to submit that?
Yeah, so again, through the research. So, one of the things I learned is that, really, if you want to get in with any of the big name publishers, like the big name Christian publishers, like Baker or Zondervan or Moody, or, you have to have an agent. And so I did some research on how you submit to an agent. But that was a really discouraging process, actually, because as I researched agents and and I did submit my proposal to a number of agents, but what I realized in the agent world is that they want you to have a platform if they're going to publish you. So, there was some agents, like on their website, they would say, don't even bother submitting a proposal if you don't have 50,000 followers. I'm like, 50,000. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I'm like,
What?
Not close to that at all. Like, I don't even think I have 5,000 followers. So I'm like, yeah, like, and so it's discouraging, because I'm like, I don't even want to do what's necessary to try to gain that kind of following. Like, that just seems exhausting to me. Like, the amount of time that you'd have to spend on social media and, to try to cultivate a following like that. I was like, that basically those big publishers, they want to know that you're going to be able to sell books and that you have this ready-made audience. And so, so I really didn't have a lot of, I had a couple really good leads with agents that didn't go anywhere. So really, yeah, for a big part of 2024, that's what I was working on. I did end up writing three chapters and an introduction during 2024, because there were some agents that wanted 3 chapters, so I wrote 3, but then I stopped and I was just submitting. But I realized that I would have better chances with a smaller publisher, because the smaller publishers don't require an agent. You can submit directly to them. So I really thought a lot about how I wanted to go about this. I know that a lot of you are self-published. I have a lot of admiration for that. I wasn't attracted to self-publishing, mainly because I didn't want to do all the work. Like, I didn't want to do all of the, and it's expensive. You know, you have to hire an editor and you have to hire a designer and you have to figure out all the page layout and all of that kind of stuff. Like, to me, I was just like, I don't want to do that. I just want to write a book, and I don't want to put money. I didn't have enough confidence in myself to say I'm going to put money into something that I don't know if people are going to read it. And so, I wanted somebody else to tell me that this book was worth writing. Somebody who wasn't my husband or my mom. And so that was really a big part. And I do think that if I hadn't found a publisher, I think that I probably would have eventually gone ahead and self-publish, because the longer that I was in this process of writing, getting this proposal ready, I really wanted to write this book. Like, it was like this burning fire within me where I was like, I really want to write it. And so I do think that probably if I hadn't gotten a publisher, I would have gone the self-publishing route, because I just really wanted the book to be written. But I eventually finally did get a publisher. So the publishing company is Gospel Centered Discipleship. They have a website. They have a book community. They have a writers community, an online writers community, and they publish a blog, but they also publish books. And so they're not big. They've probably only published like 30, 40 books in the last few years. So it's not a big publishing company. But I found from the very beginning that they were really like-minded. They understood what I was trying to do. They weren't trying to change things. And I really felt like, okay, like, they're not going to just come in and just like take my idea and try to make it something completely different. Like, they get what I want to do. And so, yeah, so it's been, so I signed that contract in August, and they are asking me to have the draft done April 1st. And with the goal that then it would actually be out in the world in January of 2027. So it's a long process, because from the time of the first draft in, then he said we'll do probably 2 rounds of revisions, depending on how much they feel like needs to be revised, and then it'll come into the design and the cover and all of that kind of stuff. But they will take care of it all for me, so I'm very happy about that. Yeah, and it's since it's a small publishing company, I didn't get an advance, but that's fine. I'm not in this for the money. You know, you have a burning passion to write books. You don't do it for the money. Like, it's so funny. So funny how many people, when they say to me like, "Oh wow, you got a book contract, and this is gonna pay for your children's college education." I'm like, no, guys. Like, I mean, most books sell 2,000 copies at the most. Like, that's even a book that's traditionally published. So yeah, so I get a percentage of the sales is in the contract, but yeah, so it's probably less than what you would make if you're self-publishing, but I don't have to do any outlay of money. And so that's kind of where the positive part comes in on that.
What was their name again?
The Gospel Centered Discipleship is the name of the publishing company, yeah.
And they're going to be asking for addresses and phone numbers in a few minutes.
I mean, you can look up their website, and they have a page.
What did you say, blog?
Sorry?
Like a blog?
Is it a blog?
No.
Sorry.
The name of the company.
Oh, Gospel Centered Discipleship.
Gospel.
Gospel Centered. Yeah, sorry. Gospel Centered Discipleship.
Are you just writing about your life? Or?
So more about the book itself. So the working title right now is Longing for a Better Country. I don't know if, we'll get to that point where we talk about it, because it's kind of long. And the subtitle is Living as a Missionary in Africa Taught Me How to Live as a Christian in America. So that's really the theme of what I'm writing about. I don't know if that's actually what it will be called when it gets to that time. But it is part memoir, so probably about the first 20% of each chapter is narrative of things that I experienced overseas, and then taking that experience and applying it to the Christian life for anyone. So things like calling, things like theology of work, find money, living as a learner, like essentially like encouraging American Christians to see themselves as missionaries and almost cross-cultural missionaries, and getting to know the surrounding culture in the same way that a missionary would, talking about risk, hardship and suffering, and then just living with an eternal mindset. Right now I have 10 chapters planned, and I've written 5, working on the 6th one right now. And I really hope that it gives my readers a different perspective. I hope that it can help my readers to see the Christian life in a new and different and fresh way. And that it inspires them to live differently and to live on mission. So that's really what I'm hoping people will get from it.
So you often speak, when you're blogging, I was reading your blogs, how some of it's personal experience, and then kind of giving a Christian message from that. Will you be kind of doing the same thing?
Yes, similar to that.
So can I ask you, when you came from Africa and came back to the States, I've heard one person who was a missionary for a short bit had a really hard time adjusting to becoming an American again, and living the American, life, and associating with all the American people who had such a whole different view of life. To this person, it was just almost impossible to adjust. She has since adjusted, but I'm just wondering how it was for you. Was there a major culture clash? And I'm sure you'll probably write about it if it was.
Yeah, that's a lot about what I write about. I definitely did have a lot of culture shock coming back, and it was really hard. It didn't help that we came back in the middle of the pandemic either. Like starting a life in a new city was not a great time to do that in 2020. Like getting to know people, and like no one was talking to each other. There were no social events. So that was a whole other aspect that just made it harder. But yeah, definitely it was hard to just change my mind into thinking about American life again. But we have a great home group, and we made some great friends and found a lot of really like-minded people. And there's still times when I feel like a foreigner living in America. But as I write about, like, I actually feel like that gives me a good perspective, because I think that all Christians are called to live as foreigners. Like this world is not our home. We're not supposed to feel 100% comfortable in this place. And so if we feel out of place, that's actually something that we should lean into and push into what God wants us to learn from it. And so that's really kind of that's really the heart of what I'm writing about, is to say, how can I take those things that I've learned and that feeling of feeling like an outsider and apply that to the Christian life.
I loved your comment about that you were able to see when I think probably hit you stronger when you started really writing, because I'm writing right now about greed. It just hits me every day in so many ways that I think, what has happened to people that were so kind to people during the Depression, when somebody would knock on your door and you make sure you invited them in for a meal. You might never, or they needed a jacket and you went in and helped them. And I think, what happened?
Yeah.
And people did things without that, thinking they had to be paid. And then I was watching TV in order to watch Netflix. If I don't want, because I count them, 23 advertisements before I get to see 7 more minutes of my movie.
Right.
And for one day, because I've been in bed, I counted. I had to hit the X switch and replay. I did that 43 times to watch 1 2-hour movie.
That's crazy.
And I thought, but then I found out if I want to pay extra, for $17.95, I would get less advertisements, but they couldn't guarantee
That there'd be zero. I know.
And so I loved your comment when a publisher that could put a really fabulous, good word out, good news for people. They go, well, I'm not getting involved unless I see X amount
Right.
for myself.
I know. And that,
And I'm sure with your values of coming where you have been, and then getting hit really in the face.
Yeah. It just feels like it's just about the money.
Yeah,
you know?
it's all about, it is.
Yeah.
That's where we are now.
Right.
Because it's all about the money.
Which in one sense I think is frustrating, but in another sense I can't blame them because publishers are putting a lot of money into the book. And so they need to know that they're going to make a return on their investment. And when you consider the fact that we don't have Christian bookstores anymore, I mean, we hardly have bookstores period anymore, where people buy books. It's like everybody buys books online. And so where else are they going to, how else is the book going to get out there into the world if the person doesn't have a big following? I mean, so it's a legitimate question. I do wish though that there would be a little bit more of like being willing to give first time authors a chance and choose them based on the quality of what they have to say, not just on what is their platform, how big is, I mean, they could have a huge platform and be a terrible writer, that doesn't mean that they're going to be a good writer just because they have.
And there's another issue too, that publishers have certain storylines that they consider based on the world's hunger, what they want to publish that aren't necessarily Christian values.
Right.
And so that makes it more difficult too, is even if it's a Christian publisher, but they want, let's say, and some woke agendas, that they want you to write about. And so it narrows it down,
Because I'm of the mind, and I speak this very freely, that I worked several jobs when I worked so that I knew when I was going to retire. I planned it. I did have one little white viper escapade that sort of set me back about 10 years. But I always wanted to be able, when I retired, to not ever have to worry about money again. And I feel God has so blessed me because I'm not rich. But I don't have to worry about money. Everything I do, I can do for free. And that, to me, I'm 83 now, that to me, I feel like this is really good. Too, and you're younger,
it's a lot of freedom,
my kids, but I never would think about it. And so I don't understand how other people fool around with their life and didn't plan, so how they could just give it away later. I mean, I'm having a hard time with myself trying to view life. Why can't we? So what? Because I'm not planning to sell my house. I'm planning to give it away, furnished totally with everything, because nobody needs the money.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing.
They might want the money, but they don't need it.
I've kind of got a two-part question. One, do you consider yourself a success as a missionary? And part two, how do you define being a successful missionary?
Wow, that is
I'm sorry.
A loaded question. No, don't expect anything less from Dennis.
Wonderful question.
You are, because you have learned so much about life that's applicable to.
Yeah. I mean, we define success. It depends on how you want to define success, right? And I appreciate you asked me how to define it. You know, I would say, I mean, it's just like, it really, a missionary isn't any different from a Christian. You know, like, we have to ask ourselves, did I live my life in obedience and dependence on Christ? Like, that is the ultimate definition of being successful as a missionary or as a Christian. And I would say, I don't know, I definitely had to learn it the hard way. I mean, I feel like God had to allow me to be pretty knocked down on a lot of things in order to get me to a point of being willing to just surrender to him and to trust him with everything that went on in my life. There was a lot of really, really hard things that happened and in Tanzania, and a lot of times when we thought we had a success story, and it actually was a disaster. You know, I mean, the one story that I had published in Christianity Today was about a young man who we were ministering to, and we thought was a believer, and it just turned completely sideways. You know, I mean, so I would say, really, did I live in surrender to the Lord? I would say as much as I did, that's how I was successful. So whether God believes that or not, we'll find out on the other side, won't we?
So would these lessons, the hard lessons you learned, would those be a good core for your book?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. That's exactly what I'm using to write my book. Yeah. Yeah, I've learned that the more that I can be vulnerable when I write, that the more people can resonate with what I'm writing. And so I've learned to not be afraid to be vulnerable when I write. So that's a goal of mine, while yet still not oversharing. Like, I think that's the tricky line, right? You don't want to share too much, and I also don't want to tell somebody else's story for them. And when our lives intersect with other people's, clearly, like, you can't tell your story in a vacuum without including other people. And so I don't want to tell somebody else's story. So trying to find that line of sharing from my heart and sharing what I've learned and my own failures and weaknesses, while yet not sharing too much or, you know, breaking someone else's privacy. I'd say that's where I try to find that line.
Okay.
I was reading just yesterday, and that was sort of a mantra. I think I'll put it on my refrigerator. Every success, every failure you had is only the next chapter of your success. Because you cannot be successful unless you've had failure.
Absolutely.
Because you won't know.
Yeah.
Say it again.
Right.
Every success, every failure you have is only the next chapter towards your success.
Well, and that's a theme all throughout Scripture, right? I mean,
I was going to use it on one of my things. I'm thinking about putting these non-fiction things together. That every failure is a stepping stone.
When we're weak, he's strong, you know, and I think that his glory is most brilliant when we are at the end of ourselves. Yeah. And so I think that that's something that he, as hard as it is, he knows that that's what's good for us, and he knows that that's what he wants to use in our lives, right?
Well, it's also how we know it's God, right? Because if it's a natural ability or whatever, then you know, we tend to take like it's ours, right? Where we know that if we excel in something we know we're not good at, we know it's Him. You know?
And we should always remember everything that we do is unto Him, and if He
That's
gives
what I
us,
mean,
if
to
he
build
does,
the kingdom,
if He does
right?
give us a good, if
Gifts.
He gives us a gift, and we hone the skill, and if we're successful, we should always give God the glory, you know, for that, because it's all from Him anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was all to build the kingdom of God. I mean, like First Corinthians 13 at the beginning, it says, you know, like if you're If you know the languages of angels and of man, you're a gong. You do it
if
without
you don't
love,
have
you're a
love,
gong,
yeah, exactly.
right?
Mhm.
You sacrifice yourself for a village and for strangers, but you do it without love, you gain nothing. You know all the mysteries of heaven and earth and can move mountains with your faith, but you do it without love, you are nothing. It's like, what are you really trying to say there? You know, but yeah,
Yeah.
I've been digging into that, but that's basically what they were doing. Was they were, when he was writing that letter, what Corinth was supposed to be the perfect church, right? They had a little bit of everybody, poor, the rich, the in between, whatever. And these guys were accepting all kinds of crazy stuff. And so Paul really goes into this love stuff. You know, this is what it is to be a Christian. This is the Christian love. This is the thing. It has nothing to do with marriage. You shall know thy people by the way we love.
And no matter how gifted you are.
Right. No matter how gifted you are, right? Because they were bragging. They were like,
Right.
"Oh,
I
you know,
got
I'm
gift of
the
prophecy."
feet." Well, yeah. Well, I'm the head. You know, it's like, yeah, but you ain't going anywhere without the feet. That's like a Ferrari with no tires. Who cares?
Right. And
So-
a writer, no matter how successful in the world's eyes we may be, if we are not motivated by God's love in all that we do, it's gonna just burn up
Oh,
anyway. And
In
in
everything.
his
Well,
when the Christian
yeah, I
books
think-
are judged.
I think one of the most important things when you're writing, like probably for your blogs and stuff like this, is that you've got to show your transparency. You've got to show your failures, because you're trying to get the message across that this is God using me.
Right.
And if you're doing it, your readers are going to say, well, I could never do that. And it doesn't inspire. But when they see your failure and they see your struggles and that God is still able to use you, that lifts them up to try.
Yep. Yeah.
I got an
Did you
easy
get all the
answer.
questions?
I mean, you also asked like what advice would I give. I feel like I kind of integrated that in what I was already talking about. I don't know if I have anything additional that I would add that would be
Tell me
advice.
about how because obviously your children are important to you.
Mm-hmm.
You were a mom for lots of years, and a mom to
Still
a
am,
lot of
yeah.
other people, and
Yeah.
four, and they sound like they're close in age.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Pretty
So-
close in age. Yeah.
How did all that fit into what you wanted to do to write? Did they make little comments like "Mom's at it again"? You know,
I mean, when they were younger, they were the subject of a lot of what I wrote about.
I was wondering.
Yeah. I mean, as they got older and I realized I need to be more careful about what I share about them. And now I make sure I get their permission. I mean, I've actually done a few posts with my daughter, my oldest daughter, where I interview her and write about what she has to say.
It was really eye-opening. I thought that
But
was-
do you have boys and girls?
I have boys and girls. Yeah, 2 girls and 2 boys.
Oh,
Yeah.
on purpose, huh?
Yeah. With adoption, you can actually
Yeah,
choose those
choose.
things. Yeah. So this book is not about my kids. I mean, they're going to be, partial players, like their names will be in it for different stories and stuff, but I'm not talking about them. Like they're not part of the story. It was, now that I'm writing this book, like I've told them, like I'm going to need a lot more time to be able to sit down and do this, more than the time I spent in writing before. So I am having to make sacrifices now, but it's temporary for now, and they are, 2 of them are driving, so they are more independent, so they don't need me as much, but yeah, I don't think that there was a huge, I don't think that I spent so much time writing in the past that they necessarily felt
I just
it.
wondered.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Amy.
Yeah.
Appreciate
Yeah.
it.
Happy
I'll
to
turn this off.
happy to
and
be
I'm sure
here.
others might
Sure.
have questions.